What is up everyone, Boshi here, back at it in Raid Shadow Legends, and we have a pretty interesting 10 times event popping up tomorrow, so let's talk about it. Alrighty guys, so like I said, we do have a 10 times summoning event popping up tomorrow on Friday, 9/10. Now the reason I call it interesting is because it's sarcastically being called the 10 times Boomal summoning event, and that's because most, if not all, of the champions involved in this 10 times deal with having a strategy for defeating Boomal Dreadhorn in the Doom Tower. Now I know there is a lot of backlash on this event. Now I'm going to go ahead and say my piece with this really quickly before we get into the champion reviews. If you do not want to hear this, go ahead and go down to the description down below or on the side, wherever YouTube's putting it, and I'll go and put content chapters to jump straight to the champion reviews. But yeah, so my piece with this is that you can look at it two different ways, right? You can look at it in the negative light where you think Plarium is very much trying to profit on the fact that Dreadhorn has proven to be a roadblock for a lot of people, and they are offering champions to do well against Dreadhorn. Now that is the way that Plarium made themselves look. I'm not going to deny that at all. This is definitely not a good look for them. Now the other way that I am tending to look at this a little bit more is the fact that content creators, Redditors, just people in general in the community have come up with these strategies on how to beat Dreadhorn, and Plarium has realized that, and they're saying, hey, you know what, these are the strategies being offered to the community on how to beat Dreadhorn. Let's offer a 10 times dealing with these champions that are being, shown in these strategies, and give people a chance to get these champions so they can get past Dreadhorn as a community, because I don't any way, shape, or form think that a lot of these strategies were ones that Plarium thought of themselves. Now, I could be totally wrong in that fact, but that is just my 2 cents. A lot of these people, or a lot of these champions, I should say, in this 10 times deal with very much community-driven strategies. So I will say that that's the way I'm going to go ahead and look at it. I'm just not a negative person, so it is what it is, but let's go ahead and jump right into the champion reviews. Alright guys, so quick note before we get into the champion reviews, I do want to mention that I'm going to talk about the champions more in a general sense, but I will go ahead and make mention of any key abilities that are going to be very useful on the Dreadhorn boss fight. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say, so let's jump into the very first champion. So the very first one we're going to look at is Exemplar. So she is a Void Epic champion from the High Elves faction, attack based. So on the A1 we have attack one enemy 2 times, places an extra hit if this attack is critical. This is always nice. Attack champions are always supposed to be built with 100% crit, and she's Void, so you're pretty much always going to be guaranteed a triple hit on the A1. Now, we'll put one of the target's skills on a full cooldown if the first hit is critical and the target is under a weaken. Now, if they are not under a weaken, it'll do the same exact thing, but it won't put a skill on a full cooldown. It'll only put it on a 2-turn cooldown. So definitely not the greatest A1, but a triple hit on a attack-based champion is never a bad thing, and this actually does more than a lot of A1s out there, so definitely not a bad A1. On the A2 we have Pincer Attack, attacks 3 times at random. Each hit has a 75 or 100% chance if you book it of placing a 25% weaken debuff for 2 turns, and this can go down to a 2-turn cooldown. So a lot of synergy with the A1 as you need the weaken on the target in order to put stuff on cooldown with the A1. Now granted, I do not like the whole attack 3 times at random just because it can hit the same target twice, so you're not necessarily applying weaken to 3 different targets. But yeah, overall not a terrible ability. Once again, it is on a low cooldown, so you are hitting multiple targets a lot, but yeah. Now on the A3 we have Capture. Attack one enemy, has a 75 or 100% chance if you book it of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn and a block active skill debuff for 2 turns, and this could go on a 3-turn cooldown if booked. So this is where she kind of comes in handy with Boomal, as she can apply a freeze to one of the bomb minions, which reduces the blow up damage from 40% down to 20%, I believe. Now I will not choose to use Exemplar on Boomal specifically just because it's a single target freeze and you are wanting to try to do an AoE freeze. But overall, when it comes to things like PvP or maybe even faction crypts, this is not necessarily a bad ability, as any type of CC is never a bad thing. And then on the aura, we have increased ally crit rate in arena by 27%. Not a big fan of ally crit rate auras. You should always just build your people to be 100% crit if that's what they're going to be doing. But yeah, overall, not the worst champion, but definitely not a champion that is very sought after or anything, and I definitely would not go after her for Boomal Dreadhorn specifically. Yeah, let's go on to the next one. So the next one is going to be Shirimani. So Shirimani is going to be a support legendary champion from the same faction. So on the A1, we have Bolts of Cold, attacks 3 times at random, has a 15% chance of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn. Definitely not a high chance of placing a freeze, but it is on the A1, so always having a chance to freeze is never a bad thing. Can be useful on Boomal for the same reason Exemplar with her freeze, but 15% chance, definitely not a reliable way to freeze. On the A2, we have Rejuvenating Wave, heals one ally by 50% and other allies by 20% of their max HP. Very nice heal, especially for a single target, and then you get an additional AoE heal. Places a 15% continuous heal buff for 2 turns on targets with full HP, just to keep people topped off. Always a little nice touch there, and can go down to a 4-turn cooldown. Very solid ability, very useful in faction crypts, PvP, PvE content. Yeah, overall just a really solid ability. On the A3, we have Ice Storm. Attacks all enemies, has an 80 or 100% chance if you book it of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn, and then fills this champion's turn meter by 10% for each attacked enemy. And you can go ahead and get this up to 100% with books, dropping it down to a 5-turn cooldown. So this is the type of freeze you want to see on Boomal, just because you want to hit all the bombs that are out at the time that you do the freeze. Now, regardless of the fact that she can do an AoE freeze, this is on a 5-turn cooldown, and I think she will eventually fall behind on freezing the bombs, but that's just my thought process on it. Now, she does go ahead and offer a heal on the A2, which can recover from one of the bombs, or like pretty much you falling behind on freezing bombs. But yeah, overall, not a bad option for Boomal. In general, Ice Storm is a very good ability for PvP or faction crypts, though. The AoE CC is a very nice thing, and it allows her to catch up with healing. And then obviously you have an additional chance to place freezes with her A1. So definitely a really cool kit. I actually have a Shirimani. I unfortunately haven't been able to play with her too much. But yeah, definitely someone that's on my radar. And also, I do want to mention, we did just recently, I think the Ice Golem tournament is still going for the High Elves faction only challenge. Now, we've seen that challenge come up multiple times. She would do great in Ice Golem, placing a freeze on the waves, applying that AoE heal during the actual fight. So overall, not a bad champion for that either. And then the aura, increased ally defense in faction crypts by 33%, allows for survivability in faction crypts, because we know a lot of people are trying to still get those done before Shadowkin becomes a faction crypt, and it just adds additional to getting Lydia. But yeah, overall, very solid champion just in general, not just for Boomal. Alright, the next champion we're going to look at is actually my favorite champion in the game, and that's because he just looks cool, and the fact that I think he was my first Void legendary I ever got, and that is Gurgoh the Augur. So look at him, he looks awesome, has a huge mace to hit people with. Legendary attack champion for the Ogren tribe. So on the A1, attack one enemy 2 times, places an extra hit if the target has a freeze debuff, so applying that 3rd hit if they are under a freeze. Now, I do realize that freeze reduces the damage dealt, so the extra hit kind of just makes up for the fact, but overall, definitely not a bad A1. On the A2, we have Bone Chiller, which is pretty much what he's known for. Removes 2 random buffs from all enemies, and then has a 80 or 100% chance if you book it of placing a freeze debuff on all enemies for 1 turn, and then grants an extra turn. So even though you drop this down to a 4-turn cooldown with books, this is technically a 3-turn cooldown because you gain the extra turn from it. This is a very solid way of doing an AoE freeze. Can definitely lock down stuff in faction crypts, in arena, in dungeons in general. I was actually running him in my Dragon 24 team for a while just for fun. But yeah, overall very solid. And on Boomal, this is the type of freeze you definitely want to have in there if that is the way you're going about it. You have an AoE freeze to freeze all bombs available on the Boomal boss and this is down to a 3-turn cooldown, like I said, even though it is technically only a 4-turn cooldown. So definitely a really good ability just overall. Also very useful in Spider if you're trying to do speed runs. On the A3, we have Avalanche, attack one enemy, and then places an extra hit if the target has a freeze debuff. Very similar to the A1, but this one actually deals a decent amount of damage as well on a 5-turn cooldown. And then you have the passive Frost Embrace, has a 50% chance of placing a freeze debuff on the attacker for 1 turn if this champion loses more than 20% of their max HP on 1 attack. Very similar to the Frost set, but it has a loss of HP requirement there. And then the aura, increase ally attack and faction crypts by 44%. That is a lot of attack to gain, but it is only for faction crypts, so it is what it is. Overall, though, like I said, my favorite champion, but a very solid champion when it comes down to CCing waves for, progression-wise. For PvP, very solid choice for CCing and, getting to go first and stuff like that. Like I also said, Spider definitely speeds up the runs by freezing all the spiders and having HP burn. Just ticks away all the damage on the spider. Very solid on Boomal for getting all those bombs frozen, and it's a very consistent freeze, right? It's 100% chance if you book it. It's very low cooldown for what it's doing. Yeah, can't really say much about Gurgoh. He's just a really cool champion and very solid kit for what he is meant to do. Alright guys, the next one we're going to go ahead and look at is going to be, not in the Skinwalkers, is going to be in the Undead Horde, and that is Anax. So Anax is an attack-based champion from the Undead Horde. He is an epic champion. On the A1 we have Piercing Shottles, I don't know. Attack one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30 or 35% chance if you book it of placing a big decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Never a bad thing to have a major debuff on the A1, so very solid A1. On the A2, Deathly Ichors attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 75 or 100% chance if you book it of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff and a 5% poison debuff for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. So this is where him becoming a Boomal champion is involved, right? He provides the decreased accuracy, which is huge for level 90 Boomal, as level 90 Boomal on Hard Doom Tower has about 750 accuracy, so you can lower that down to a 375, making things possible to resist. And it applies it for a 3-turn cooldown, which is a lot larger than most of the other champions, and you do have to remember that Boomal does do extra turns every once in a while. So granted, he will get this decreased accuracy off very quickly, but with Anax, he does provide a automatic 3-turn accuracy right there, or decreased accuracy I should say right there. So very reliable decreased accuracy if you choose to use Anax, and he provides that poison for additional damage. On the A3, we have Soul Feast. Attack one enemy has a 75 or 100% chance if you book it of placing a 25% weaken. So you can see right off the bat he has a drop defense and a weaken in his kit along with a poison. So very solid champion. And then you have heals this champion by 50% of the damage inflicted, and this is also on a 3-turn cooldown, so it has a self-healing mechanic as well. And then on the passive we have Revenant. Passive effects is places a 60% increased defense buff on this champion for 2 turns when their HP drops below 75%, and will place a big increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns when their HP drops below 50%. And then you have the active effect of granting an extra turn for this champion when its HP drops below 10%. So granted, the passive is a little bit weird, but I think the whole thing is that you take less damage once you get a little bit low. When you get really low, you get an increased attack, which you can benefit from the heal off the A3, which will heal you back up a decent amount, and then the extra turn is to hopefully be able to A3 if you drop below this amount, which granted, you're an attack based champion, you might just die at that point, but I think that's what it's supposed to be about. And also, not is he only good against Boomal, he's a very solid champion in general, and a lot of people have found much success with him on Clan Boss. So overall, a very solid champion. Faction Crypts, Clan Boss, Boomal, Secret Room for the Epic Undead Horde. Yeah, he has many places he can be very good at. So overall, a very solid epic champion. The next one we're going to go and look at is one of the most sought after champions, not just for Boomal, but for general in the game, mainly clan boss, and that is Vizier Ovelis. So, Dark Elf legendary attack based champion, known for his A1 accursed blades, attack one enemy 3 times. Each hit has a 35 or 50% chance if you book it of increasing the duration of all debuffs for 1 turn. This makes clan boss a cakewalk because you can keep up poisons, drop defense, drop attack, any type of debuff you're placing on the clan boss 100% of the time, especially since now that we can control the AI, you can literally have him do nothing but A1 on clan boss. So yeah, very sought after legendary for a lot of people, and he has made a splash into Boomal, and that's because of this ability, his A2. So Master of Misery attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance or a 75% chance if you book it of placing a block buffs debuff, a 50% decrease attack debuff, and a 100% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. And this is going to be on a 4-turn cooldown. You can't decrease that, but the big thing with this ability is that he's providing a block buffs. So if you're going against Boomal, right, and I'm going to talk specifically for Boomal for a second, block buffs will prevent him from doing his increase attack buff that you cannot strip from him. So you do a block buffs, prevents that. You do the decrease attack, which he has a lot of attack because he's a bomb-based champion or a bomb-based boss, so it reduces the bomb damage that you'll receive when you get bombs put on you, if they are put on you. And then you can extend it with his A1, so he never has to technically reapply and have the possibility of getting additional bombs put on him. So that is where he is, you know, a great addition to a Boomal strategy if you're running that type of comp. Then on the A3, we have Vizier of Poisons, attacks one enemy, applies a debuff spread effect, a very rare effect nowadays. Now, granted, it's not the best effect in the game, but is kind of useful every once in a while. Takes 2 random debuffs from the target and places them on all enemies, and then will place a Perfect Veil buff on this champion for 3 turns if the target is under 2 or more debuffs. And you can drop this down to a 4-turn cooldown. Perfect Veil does reduce a decent amount of damage, I should say, when it is placed. So overall, not a bad ability, but definitely not something he's really known for. Mainly A1 and A2, and then you have his passive Unseen Assassin, places a Perfect Veil buff on this champion for 2 turns at the start of each round, just to, you know, have a little bit of protection during waves and stuff like that. And then you have an aura, increase ally attack in dungeons by 34%. Very solid, only for dungeons though. But yeah, overall, before Boomal was even a thing, he is a very sought after champion. So this gives a very good reason to go after him, because he is good on Boomal, but he's also a really good clan boss champion. Alright guys, so the next champion we're going to look at is literally one that is definitely not looked at beyond the fact that he can solo Boomal, guys. So when he came out, he was definitely not a wanted legendary. I actually really liked him just because his kit was unique and the fact that he looks amazing, but that's enough about that. Let's go ahead and jump into the kit. So he's going to be a legendary HP based dwarf champion. On the A1, we have Crystal Flesh. Attack one enemy, heals by 15% of the damage inflicted if this champion has 50% HP or less, or will fill this champion's turn meter by 15% if he has more than 50% HP. Books are not going to do anything, just helps out the damage, but, you know, gets extra healing if he's low, or gains extra turn meter if he is already stable. So overall, not a bad A1. On the A2, Emerald Curse, attack one enemy, inflicts bonus damage equal to the difference in HP percentage levels between this champion and the target, plus 1% damage for every 1% difference. That is if you are lower or higher, guys. So no matter what the difference is, he is going to deal that much difference. Percentage-wise. And then inflicts bonus damage equal to the difference in number of buffs on this champion and the target, plus 10% damage per buff on him. And you can drop this down to a 3-turn cooldown. This actually does a decent amount of damage, guys, especially like if you are doing an unkillable clan boss team and you hit a full HP clan boss. Because he's going to majority of the time be at lower, like 25% or lower, he's going to have that 75% damage increase from the difference in HP and stuff like that. So overall, a underrated ability, I'm going to say. On the A3, we have Boon Subversion. Attacks all enemies, has a 80 or 100% chance if you book it of stealing 2 random buffs before attacking, and then places an extra hit on enemies that have any buffs left, and can drop down to a 4-turn cooldown. Now, a lot of people thought that he could be somewhat like a Trunda in sorts, where you just don't build any accuracy on him, and he can get a double hit on people that he just doesn't steal buffs from. You know, he doesn't hit that hard because in general you want to steal the increased defense buffs and stuff like that, because he just has to deal with it, and his multipliers aren't a crazy amount, right? Now, I personally have him, and I built him with high accuracy where you could steal debuffs and stuff like that, and he does awesome as a buff stripper. And do realize if he steals buffs, this is just going to buff his A2 damage. So yeah, overall, very underrated ability. Once again, I really like the guy even before he was known for soloing Boomal, but his passive is what makes it possible to solo Boomal. So Diamond Skin is his passive. Passive effect is places a block damage buff on this champion for 1 turn at the start of each round, so prevents damage right off the bat unless it's buff stripped. Now, the active effect does have a 4-turn cooldown, but blocks incoming damage and places a block damage buff on this champion for 1 turn when they receive a hit that would drop them below their HP. That would drop their HP below 30%. Sorry, guys. So pretty much the way that he solos Boomal is the fact that this passive will prevent, whenever the bombs explode, prevent him from dropping down to 30%. So if it would drop him down to 30%, it prevents that damage initially. So he could be at like 75%. It predicts that he'll drop down to 30% or lower, block the damage from the bombs, possibly from Boomal, and then he can go at and hit Boomal again. Now, you do have to build him in a Rejuve and Immortal sets in order for him to just constantly recover his HP, but the block damage passive makes it possible for him to just absorb a lot of damage and then just go at it again. So that is how he solos. And then you have the aura of increasing ally HP in all battles by 30%. But yeah, overall, I think he was a solid champion before he was known for soloing Boomal, but a lot of people are after him because he is someone that can solo Boomal at floor 90. But yeah, that is that. Now, the last 2 champions are going to be from the Shadowkin. So the first one we're going to talk about is Sachi. So Sachi, definitely not a very talked about champion. Support Shadowkin now can be definitely useful in faction crypts because we don't have faction crypts yet. But on the A1, we have an AoE attack all enemies, has a 40 or 50% chance if you book it of placing a decreased accuracy, big version of decreased accuracy for 2 turns. So right off the bat, very much like Vizier, has that decreased accuracy, which will very much help if you're running a resist team. But not a bad AoE A1, but not the best. You know, decreased accuracy comes in handy every once in a while, but yeah. On the A2, we have Heart Pierce. Attack one enemy, has a 75 or 100% chance if you book it of placing a 30% decreased crit rate debuff and a leech debuff for 2 turns. Decreased crit rate, not the greatest debuff. Leech, I'm always a big fan of, and you can drop this down to a 2-turn cooldown, so pretty much consistently keeping Leech up. Not a bad ability. On the A3, we have Shadow Ambush. Places a big increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns, then attacks one enemy. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 20% if this attack is critical. So probably want to build her with crit rate gloves because she is a support champion. She's not going to deal a lot of damage. You can drop this down to a 3-turn cooldown, but I do like the whole turn meter fill here. The increased attack is always nice for your damage dealers. And then you have the passive, revives a random ally with 30% HP whenever this champion kills an enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a fear debuff on all enemies for 1 turn whenever an ally is revived. So this could be a nice passive for faction crypts, right? You always need everyone alive in order to 3-star faction crypts. So this is one of those things where it's like, oh, you kill a random person, you revive someone that died possibly. And yeah, so pretty cool passive in my opinion, and I could see her definitely being useful in faction crypts specifically. When it comes to Boomal though, you're mainly looking at the A1 for a consistent decreased accuracy to be up. And the last one we're going to look at, guys, is Burangiri. So this was the very first guy that was found out that could solo Boomal, but as of right now, he can only solo Boomal up to level 50 on hard. Now, I'd imagine that means he can solo all of normal levels of Boomal, but I'm not exactly sure on that, so don't quote me on that. So yeah, let's go ahead and go through the kit. So he is going to be an epic champion from the Shadowkin, a defense-based champion. So on the A1, we have Battering Skull. Attack one enemy, has a 20 or a 40% chance if you book it of placing a provoke debuff for one turn. Nothing too crazy, but it is an A1 provoke, so not a bad A1. On the A2, we have Bakemono Charge. Attacks all enemies, has a 40 or 60% chance if booked of placing a stun debuff for one turn, and on a 3-turn cooldown if you book it. So definitely not a bad ability. AoE, possible stun, decent chance to stun at that. And on a 3-turn cooldown, so definitely not a bad one for CCing the waves, and that is what he is about since he has Provoke on the A1 and he has the stun on the A2. On the A3, we have Frightful Warcry, placing a 25% strengthen buff on all allies for 2 turns, and then also places a shield buff for 2 turns on all allies with less than 50% HP. The shield buff is equal to 15% of the target's max HP on a 4-turn cooldown, so it provides a lot of support right there, strengthen and a shield. And then you have the passive, which makes it possible for him to solo up to 50 hard Boomal, which is Soulmonger. So heals this champion by 50% of their max HP whenever an ally or an enemy dies. So this includes the bomb minions on the Boomal boss. So pretty much bomb minions are supposed to be blowing up doing 40% max HP, but Soulmonger is healing Burangiri for 50% of his max HP, which pretty much just negates the bombs. So you pretty much ignore the bombs. Like Samar Gemcursed, you do have to build him in a Rejuve and Immortal set in order for him just to consistent rejuve his health just from the Boomal attacks. But overall, same type of solo, ignoring the bomb damage pretty much. And then you have the aura, increase ally resist in all battles by 40. Not the greatest aura, but definitely not bad, as resist is getting more and more important in the game. But yeah, that is Burangiri. Now, like I said, he is not known for, like, he cannot solo hard 90 Boomal from what I know as of right now. So Samar is the one you want to go for if you are looking to solo Boomal. But yeah, just wanted to give you a heads up on that. That is it, guys. I know, like I said, there is a lot of backlash about this event, but it is what it is. If you wanted these champions regardless, definitely go for it, in my opinion. Cannot hurt. A lot of these champions are good in their own right, I should say. And yeah, do remember though, 10 times does not include a higher chance of getting an epic or Lego, just those champions if you get an epic or Lego. So always keep that in mind, guys. That is it. That was a very long video for you guys probably, so I'm sorry about that. But yeah, hope you guys liked it. If you like this content, make sure you subscribe and whatnot, and I will talk to you guys later. See ya.